Listening, multiple choice, multiple answers practice session. Here's the first question for you.
I, of all people, know the valuable contributions that whistleblowers make. In fact, most frauds are discovered by them. 42% of frauds are discovered by a whistleblower in comparison to other methods like management review and external audit. And when you think about some of the more classic or historical fraud cases, it always is around a whistleblower. Think Watergate, discovered by a whistleblower. Think Enron, discovered by a whistleblower. And who can forget about Bernard Madoff, discovered by a whistleblower? It takes a tremendous amount of courage to come forward in the name of the truth. But when we think about the term whistleblower, we often think of some very descriptive words. Rat, snake, traitor, tattletale, weasel. And those are the nice words, the ones I can say from the stage.
Here are the correct options. The question was, which of the following statements correctly reflect the speaker's opinion about whistleblowers? That means the audio is going to be about whistleblowers, and each of these statements is supposed to represent speaker's opinion. We have to pick the ones which are correct. The first option, what whistleblowers do, is very valuable. Actually, right in the beginning, the speaker says that. So that's a correct option. And then also in the first few sentences, she says it takes a lot of courage to be a whistleblower. So that's also correct. Third option, whistleblowers can be thought of as weasels. Now she does mention weasels, but in a different way. She says that when people think of whistleblowers, they associate some very derogatory words with them, such as rat, a traitor, or weasels. So that's how she mentions this word there, but it does not reflect the speaker's opinion. Okay, because she thinks what they're doing is valuable and courageous, but a lot of people look at it differently. That's why this is not a correct option and does not reflect the speaker's opinion. It is something mentioned in the audio, but it is not speaker's opinion. It is what the speaker says other people think about whistleblowers. So you have to be very clear. You just can't say that she says weasels somewhere in the audio, and so this must be correct. Then the next one, they do this without the desire for any personal gain. It's not mentioned anywhere in the audio. Watergate was the biggest fraud uncovered by whistleblowers. Watergate is mentioned as a big fraud uncovered by whistleblowers, but she doesn't say that it was the biggest one. Similarly, in the next, she doesn't talk about that or raise a demand that the government should provide security. Most frauds are discovered by whistleblowers. Yeah, that's also something clearly mentioned. Before she gives the example of Watergate, etc., that is something she does mention. So that's why these three are your correct options. I hope you understand the reasons for that. If you have made any mistake, you have not been able to pick them, pause the video for a bit or go back and try to understand the explanation. Just make sure that you understand how we select the options and the reasoning behind that. The next option.
There's a growing group of investors, call them conscious investors. Conscious investors care about ESG issues. And they talk a lot about engaging management on ESG issues. But they don't actually get management to make changes that will improve the environment and society. And this is where conscious investors can take a page from the playbook of the activist investors. Because the activist investors have no issues getting management to make changes. They have no issues turning up the heat. Take Paul Singer. He's an old school Wall Street OG, now in his 70s, loves Doritos, loves making money. Argentina owed Paul $600 million and would not pay. Big mistake. You can't take money from an OG and not pay back. Paul went to war with Argentina. I'm not inventing. This is big. This is huge. This is bigger than Tyson versus Holyfield, Ali versus Foreman. This was man versus country. Paul Singer started going around the world trying to seize up Argentinian assets. At one point, he tried to seize an Argentinian Navy vessel off the coast of Ghana. He tried to take over a 350-foot ship while big Navy officers with big guns were on the ship. He got the police in Ghana to show up with a crane.
The correct options. The question is, which of the following is true about the investor discussed in the audio? Now, when the audio begins, the speaker talks about activist investors, about some other types of investors, etc. And then becomes more specific and gives the example of a particular investor. So that's the investor that we need to focus on. The investor does not care about changes to improve environment and society. So the audio mentions environment, society, the impact, etc., all of that, but not in relation to this particular investor. So that's why this is not true about that investor. Did his best to recover the money owed to him by Argentina. That is correct. It's clearly mentioned that he went to war with Argentina to get his money back. So that's why this is true. The investor tried to seize Brazilian assets all over the world. The investor tried to seize assets, but those of Argentina, not Brazil. So make sure you try to understand the full sentences. So this is not true. The next, the investor tried to take over an Argentinian Navy vessel. Yeah, that's also clearly mentioned. So that's correct. Sought the help of Ghana army to recover his money. That's not mentioned. He says tried to take over the vessel near the coast of Ghana, but doesn't say that he took the help of Ghana army. So again, as I was saying, when you are trying to understand, make sure that you understand fully. It's important to know the context in which the words and the phrases are mentioned. So Ghana is mentioned, but in the context that it was near the coast of Ghana, he tried to seize the Argentinian Navy vessel, not in the context of Ghanaian army. Those are the common mistakes people make. They understand a part, they don't try to understand the overall context. That's why I always emphasize, take notes, try to visualize so that you have as much context as possible when you are giving your answers. The next question now.
There's 3 things that I've learned from my research on this that you can immediately apply if you've been harassed or discriminated against at work. I want to help you turn your memory into evidence. Evidence that even a memory skeptic like me is unlikely to find fault with. First of all, James Comey had it right. The former head of the FBI used to sit in his car, lock himself in after meetings with the president, and write down absolutely everything he could remember about what happened. The now famous recordings proved to be quite useful later on. Be like Comey. Now, you don't need to lock yourself into your car to do this, but please, immediately after something happens, I want you to contemporaneously record what happened. And do this before talking to anyone else about it, because as soon as you share your story with friends or family or colleagues or therapists, you have the potential to distort or change your memory of the event. Uncontaminated, contemporaneous evidence is worth gold. Second, the type of evidence matters. Sure, you can do a handwritten note of what happened, but how do you prove when you wrote it? Instead, pull out your computer or smartphone and make a note that's time-stamped, where you can prove this was recorded at this time. Contemporaneous time-stamped evidence is better. Finally, make sure what you're writing down is actually relevant.
Here are the answers for you. So the question is, if the speaker wrote an article giving advice on what to do in case of harassment, which of the following pieces of advice would you find in that article? So that means we need to listen to this audio, which is most likely going to be about harassment and the advice on what to do in case of harassment. So this is another way of asking, what does the speaker suggest you should do in case of harassment based on the audio? Or what does the speaker thinks you should do in case of harassment based upon the audio? So this is just another way of saying that, because if she writes an article, she'll give the same advice as she gave in the audio. So basically, each of these options, you have to see which of these are the ones that she mentions in the audio, because then those are the ones that will also go in the article. Now, first one, write down everything you remember immediately after the incident. That's clearly mentioned. She even gives the example of the FBI person who used to write down everything after meeting the president. The next, share the incident with your friends and family as you get out of it, as soon as you get out of it. So, sorry, there's a little mistake in the option there. But what the audio actually says, what she actually says is that write it down before meeting everybody. So do not share with the friends first. And this is a common trick that you come across in the options. They give you an option which has the same kind of words but an exactly opposite meaning. Because she says, do not share, first write. And here she says that write it down as soon as you get out of the incident of harassment. Try to have a time note written. Yeah, that's clearly mentioned that to have a proper proof, better to write on a computer or on a phone. So similarly, you can also validate the other options. The next one, put down all the details related to incident, even if it doesn't seem relevant. Actually, she says only write down what's relevant. And yeah, and I'm sure you can also find the reasoning for the next three options. So I'll leave them to you. I want you to understand clearly why the second last option is correct and why the other two are not correct. The last question of this practice session now.
And within 15 years of discovering the electron, these X-rays were being used to make images inside the human body, helping soldiers' lives being saved by surgeons who could then find pieces of bullets and shrapnel inside their bodies. But there's no way we could have come up with that technology by asking scientists to build better surgical probes. Only research done out of sheer curiosity with no application in mind could have given us the discovery of the electron and X-rays. Now, this tube also threw open the gates for our understanding of the universe and the field of particle physics, because it's also the first very simple particle accelerator. Now, I'm an accelerator physicist, so I design particle accelerators and I try and understand how beams behave. And my field's a bit unusual because it crosses between curiosity-driven research and technology with real-world applications. But it's the combination of those two things that gets me really excited about what I do. Now, over the last 100 years, there have been far too many examples for me to list them all, but I want to share with you just a few.
The answers. So which of the following examples illustrate the benefits of curiosity-driven research? All right, so the audio is going to talk about curiosity-driven research and give some examples to show the benefits. You have to select the options which are mentioned in the audio as benefits of that curiosity-driven research. X-rays being used, clearly mentioned. Invention of particle accelerator is clearly mentioned. Several innovations in the field of particle physics. So it doesn't say, it's not that broad. It does say, yes, there were innovations in the field of particle physics, and the invention of particle accelerator is an example, but doesn't go to the extent of saying that there were several innovations. And nothing about surgical probes or invention of life-saving technologies for soldiers. So yes, they are used, but not to the extent that these technologies are saving life. And it's directly as a benefit of curiosity-driven research. The main thing that we learn from this example is another way they put the options in the exam to confuse you. So this is called exaggeration. For example, there is one or two examples of how it had some benefits in the field of particles physics, but the option that they give you is several innovations. So it's an exaggeration. You have to be aware of this, that you only select an option if it is clearly mentioned to that extent. So in the audio, it doesn't mention that there were hundreds of innovations or several innovations. So don't be confused. Similarly, there are technologies that helped, but invention of life-saving technologies, etc., it's not mentioned to that extent. So that again is an exaggeration. I'll give you another example. So for example, in the audio, you'll hear that 50% of people benefit from this. And then you'll see an option, majority of people benefit from this. Now, somebody who doesn't pay an attention will say 50% is a large number and he'll just select majority. But to be a majority, you have to be much more than 50% or at least more than 50%, right? So don't be fooled by options like this. Make sure you pay attention to each and every word in the option because it is there for a reason, either to help you or to confuse you, but it's there for a particular reason.